Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Daily Refinement. I have Steven with us, a millennial reseller, and we're going to talk about FBA. So I am going to now start my FBA journey. And before I start, I'd like to get some consulting. So if you guys are about to start a new endeavor, it might make sense for you to pay for somebody's time. Just randomly emailing people, what should I do to get started, is usually going to result in just do it or some kind of dry response or no response. So I think it's worth it to ask somebody who knows what they're doing. Steven, do you want to tell everybody maybe where to find you online and what you've been doing?
Yeah, so I've been selling on Amazon for about almost 2 years now, on reselling in general, kind of about 2 years. On Instagram, just millennial reseller, and on YouTube, just Steven Maddox. Just recently started out there, but started out going to thrift stores and then kind of learned all the other business models of Amazon, and eventually now like 100% wholesale.
And I think now you have your own space.
Yeah, own warehouse.
And then do you have anybody helping you?
Yeah, I have one full-time employee, my brother, who does all the prepping and shipping, things like that. And then I have two VAs that help out with some more like the data type of things.
Do you have any difficulty working with your brother?
No, not at all. We get
That's
along real
lucky.
well. Yeah.
That's great.
And
Finding
it
somebody
is.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So my objective with FBA is going to be to net $10,000 a month.
Okay.
And today I want to go over just some constraints, what you think it's going to take, how much space. So I guess the first question is, I have a newer account. I'm engaged in some brands, but some advice, or maybe we'll just start there. Do you think I should go for brands that I maybe have to pay to play? Maybe you can explain what that is. Or should I be looking for random clearance items? Where would you start from scratch?
Yeah. So it really depends on what business model you want to follow, right? So if you want to do RA, OA, it's really going to help having some of those bigger brands. Now you can still be successful and definitely do 10,000 a month without having like Nike and some of those other bigger brands. But if you want to go wholesale, you don't need any of that whatsoever, because most of the brands you're going to be selling wholesale, one, you're buying directly from the supplier or an authorized distributor. So you already get an invoice from the supplier to upload to Amazon to get ungated in something if you are gated in it currently, versus like with Nike, there's really nothing you can do other than just more sales and more reviews on your account to get ungated. So I would say it kind of depends on which model you want to go after.
Got you. So I think I'm going to try a little bit of both.
Okay.
So let's say I want to build a retail arbitrage plan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recommend I make a route of stores I go to, always go to the same store, maybe meet people at the store? Is that a no-no? And then I see people running from store to store to store buying the same SKU.
Mm-hmm.
I also see people just scanning everything. Do you
Yeah.
have an approach for that?
Yeah. So when I was really heavy into the RA space, I was doing a little bit of both. At first, I've made the mistake a lot of times of, say buying Nike cleats at a Marshalls, right? And I would find the one cleats and buy like 20 pair at the first store. And then I would go around to 6 other Marshalls and buy, as many of that same pair at each store. Well, what ends up happening after you start seeing them at really 3 or 4 more stores in your area, you should probably quit buying them, because chances are they're everywhere across the country, or definitely everywhere in your region. Because then, price is going to tank, it's going to get really competitive, things are going to come down. So it's not a bad idea to bulk up on something, especially if you see there's only a few sellers on the listing, and hope that it really doesn't blow up. But I would say it's a lot better, if you have the time and the patience to do it, is to scan the whole store, and not necessarily the entire store, but for Marshalls, for instance, everyone loves the shoes, everyone loves the apparel. And I've made a lot of my profit from like the grocery section, from the beauty section at Marshalls. One of the best things starting out that I sold when I was getting everything, I sold hundreds of pairs of women's bras and things like that, because, buying it for $6, selling it for 30, and selling like instantly within a few days of checking in. So it's little sections like that that can be super lucrative that no one else is paying attention to, because everyone loves, piles of shoes and clothes and things like that.
Gotcha. So speaking a little bit on that, what do you
Mm-hmm.
think is the best way to familiarize yourself with the charts? How many sellers are on a listing? Is there a fast track way to get really familiar with that, or is it literally just experience?
Yeah, obviously, YouTube and tons of other places, there's ways to like show you how to read a Keepa chart. But honestly, like you said, experience is the best way.
Okay.
If you have questions, reach out to some people. But Keepa, I mean, it's pretty simple. It's definitely the most accurate way to look at something versus just going off the sales rank. If you have time, especially like I would always recommend, if you're going to go deep on something, say you scan something in the Marshalls and there's 30, 40 of them there, and you're thinking about if you're going to buy all 30 or 40, like I would always recommend go in, look at the reviews, look at the sales rank, and look at Keepa, look at everything, because you want to make the best educated decision you can, because there's been tons of times where I bought 30 or something because the current sales rank is 20,000. Then I get home, I see the Keepa chart, well, it's only been at 20,000 today, and it usually jumps back up to 400,000
Mm,
overnight, and then kind of stays there. So now I'm stuck with 30 units of something and try to get rid of them.
I hear you. So that's something that I've heard very commonly is
Yeah.
rank can be deceiving.
Oh yeah.
And then there's also the opposite where people will buy a high rank.
Hmm.
So again, that can't be the only metric.
No, no, it definitely can. And I've done that exact thing. I bought tons. I bought 30, 40 pairs of one shoe that is ranked 700,000, because if you look at Keep It, you can see when it's in stock with FBA, the rank drops way down to 40,000. But for the last 3 months, it's been up at 600,000 because no one FBA has been carrying it. So I'll buy a bunch of them, and then rank drops down and I start getting sales right away. So it's really just about doing your research like very thoroughly.
Got you. So I am going to be doing this with the focus of 100% FBA,
Okay.
but some sellers do merchant fulfilled.
Hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so merchant can fulfill can be great. I mainly only do it during Q4 because Amazon, gets super backed up with FBA during Q4, and people will literally pay $300 for overnight shipping. The closer it gets to Christmas for like a $40 video game. It's happened to me a bunch of times, like last year especially. So that's, in my opinion, the best time to do FBM, because like I just was talking to someone earlier today, and they had 4 claims for FBM, 4 customers saying they never got their things delivered to them. So the nice thing with FBA is that any negative experience pretty much that the customer has faults on, or the fault lies on Amazon. So it's not on you as the seller, unless it's like an actual issue with the product not being what it's supposed to be. But
Mhm.
anything that's damaged, anything that arrives late or doesn't arrive, and they leave you like 1-star review, automatically gets taken off your account. Versus FBM, any negative thing that happens, it's on you, and there's nothing you can do about it for the most part. So that's like a
Gotcha.
huge reason I love FBA. Plus, for scale, like for me right now, I'm selling anywhere from 100 to 150 items a day. And for me, I would never want to be shipping that out every single day. And it would just take a lot longer. Plus, having I have probably over 1,000 SKUs, a lot of it being books and stuff that's been in my inventory way too long from when I first started out. But still having to store all of that product in like my own warehouse, I would need a space that's 3 times bigger than what I currently have.
Do you recommend using a fulfillment center?
Like a prep center.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have used 2 of them and didn't have really good experiences with either of them. It's not a terrible idea starting out if you don't have the space or can't afford to get a space, especially like wholesale. It's not a bad idea to look into, but from the ones I worked with, like when you start having 50 cents to $1 add up per every single unit you're sending in, especially in wholesale when the margins are a little slimmer to begin with,
Hmm.
that really cuts into your margins a lot more. Versus I've always heard, and I'm kind of seeing now, that in the long run, it's cheaper to have your own warehouse and your own employees to prep everything, especially if you have things that need polybagged or you're selling 2 packs or 3 packs, because they charge extra fees for those as well. So that's why I always say if you can do it yourself, I would definitely recommend like doing everything in the house.
Do you have any recommended margins for wholesale, OA, or RA? And then I have a question after that.
Yeah. So RA, kind of when I was starting out, I tried to do above a 50% ROI.
Mhm.
Same with OA. After I kind of learned the game and realized there's a lot of money at 30% ROI, I started to dabble with that. Again, I just had to make sure I did a lot more research, because one reason I always tried to shoot for 50% ROI is because the price taking,
Mm,
especially in brands like Nike. That way you have some room for the price to drop down, because it's going to happen. regardless of if you think you scanned it. There's one seller, oh, I'm going to buy 50 of these because it's 300% ROI. There's been time and time again where I bought shoes for $20, expecting to sell them for 100. And there's one other seller, I'll buy 30 of them, send them in. And by the time they get there, the price is at $35. And there's like 40 sellers on it. So that's
Mm,
why I always say the higher the margin, the better in RA. Sure, you can mess around with some margins, but I know a lot of other sellers that literally will just liquidate stuff and lose money on $5,000 worth of inventory in 2 weeks just to kind of get their money back and try to reinvest it again.
gotcha.
So with wholesale, um, I've always tried to stay above a 30% ROI, just because, like I said, in wholesale, you can get some of those higher margins, but it's a lot less likely versus RA or OA. So now I'm kind of even dabbling down into like a 20% ROI as well, because, for me, like I said, I'm kind of switching things over to a more faster paced selling model. So if something sells 50 times a month at a 25% ROI, I would much rather have that versus something that sells 5 times a month at a 200% ROI.
So that being said, most of the large FBA sellers that I know are
Mhm.
under 10% ROI. Is that because there's less competition when you're operating so slim? Are there less people competing with you? They seem to have more stable businesses, but again, it's more capital intensive.
Right, and that's one of the main thing, like you said, is way less competition,
Mm,
because a lot of those bigger distributors or brands that they're buying from, like they have $20,000 minimum order requirements,
mm,
and to get it at that price, that it is going to be a 10% margin, but most of their SKUs are selling hundreds of times per month, so they don't
right.
care because the velocity is there. So it's like it's a really fine line though, because obviously a lot of guys that have huge warehouses, 20, 30, 40 employees, like you really need to make sure you're selling through a lot of things to afford all the rest of your overhead as well. So, I mean, I see it at scale. You kind of have to start taking some of those smaller margins if you want to continue to grow. But as you add on, more employees, more software, things like that, you just got to make sure there's enough, meat left on the bone.
When did you hire your brother?
Yeah, beginning of this year. So it's been about 6, 7 months now.
Were you the first 18 months, were you solo?
Pretty much, yeah. My wife helped out, here and there on the weekends if we went up and did some sourcing or prepping a shipment at night, something like that. And I had both of my brothers here, especially during Q4, help out with some shipments or things like that. But for the most part, it was myself.
Is she participating now?
A little bit. She's finishing college this year, so she's like mainly focused on that. But she was kind of helping out with a little bit of wholesale, like going through SKU sheets after we get them from suppliers and things like that.
Any interest in a husband and wife team after?
Maybe we'll see.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I see people doing that, and sometimes it's amazing, and sometimes they immediately separate into
Right.
different things. Cool. So on wholesale, I mean, definitely one of the most common questions on my channel is, do you have a structure set up to, do you approach companies the same way each time?
Pretty much, yeah. So I keep it super simple, no secret at all. Is I reach out to a supplier, distributor, whatever, and I literally say, "Hello, I'm looking for some information, opening a wholesale account, and what your requirements are," and that's it. And it's like a huge thing. So many people overcomplicate it, and they'll write out this 3 paragraph, 4 paragraph long email of, "Hello, like my name's Steven. I own this business. We did X amount of sales last year. We're based here. We carry these products." And like I always tell people, usually the person receiving that email isn't even the person you need to be like trying to sell yourself to,
Mm.
because they're going to forward it to someone else who like actually makes a decision on if you can get an account with them or not, and they don't really care about all that. Like at the end of the day, they just kind of want your money and want to know where you're going to be selling their stuff. That's it.
What about local? Any of your distributors local that you met in person?
Yeah, so I've had I think three total that I have. I'm still kind of exploring that. It is definitely very intriguing because shipping costs and things like that. Um, so there is a lot of potential there. I just haven't done as much research on that. But the ones that I have worked with locally have been really great.
So another question I have is, there are a lot of businesses in my area that there's a lot of walking traffic. So
Mhm.
what these stores will do, I went to one store that said, we don't like to have any items in the store that are discounted ever. we literally, it goes from full price to liquidated.
Wow.
We don't have, because the space is so expensive. We want to make full retail every single time we have a sale. So there's just no discounts. So that being said, um, buying those closeouts of products is not wholesale, but I would have an invoice from that company. Is that going to hold up when Amazon wonders why we have 13 of the same item?
So Amazon, what they do when that comes to that, they'll reach out to that company and do
Mm.
research on that company. They'll call that company, and then they kind of just make a decision on a case by case basis if they want to decide if they're like an authorized distributor of that product or not. So I have heard people getting ungated using an invoice from like a liquidation company, but I've also heard it not working out a lot too. So it's kind of just like case by case.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's talk about software. Do you
Yeah.
have any recommended software to keep track?
Yeah.
Well, actually,
So
maybe anything. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I use a bunch of different software. Um, as Inventory Lab is by far the first thing you need to get if you're starting on Amazon. I started with it from day one for my first shipment and just makes things way smoother and way quicker.
Okay.
Um, Also, like a repricer, after you start to scale, you don't want to be manually checking all your prices and changing those prices because on Amazon it's super competitive with pricing. Pricing constantly is changing, so you definitely want to have software to use that. If you're doing used items, reprice it's really good. That's what I started with for books. A like kind of like mid-level repricer that I used to use. It's called Be Cool, BQOOL.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one I use now and have used for like about 8 or 9 months now is called App Eagle, or it used to be called App Eagle. It's called Inform.co now. And that's the best repricer out there, in my opinion. It's also like one of the most expensive ones. But it's a reactive repricer, which means that as soon as someone else changes their price on Amazon, your price automatically changes it if it's like within the parameters you set up. Versus Be Cool and some of the other softwares, it's going to check the price every 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. And then if the price is different, then yours will change. But Inform.co, it's reactive. So especially during Q4, you always want to be like within the buy box range. So that's why it's really good to have like a reactive repricer versus one that kind of checks every few minutes and then will change the price.
Okay. So repricer,
Hmm.
inventory lab.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah. I'm trying to think other ones. BrickSeek, is good if
Yep.
you want to check local inventory levels for RA things. Tactical arbitrage can be really great for online arbitrage. Just I always tell people, don't scan the toy section of Walmart and of Target and things like that and expect to find all these deals because everyone else is doing that. And there's like hundreds of websites on tactical arbitrage that you can use to scan. So I always recommend pick some of those other websites no one else is looking at, and you can find a lot of really good products there. Outside of those, I don't have any software like for wholesale specifically. I've tried out a bunch of different ones, and none of them really worked out. Have been super accurate for me. So now I'm still kind of doing that manually. It's kind of what I have my VAs do, is like checking inventory levels and seeing like if I need to place orders and things like that. But that's basically it for like a lot of the main core software that I use.
Okay. So this is going to be a question that just specific to you. What does your day look like?
Yeah. So pretty much for me, get up, come to the warehouse. I'm usually here by 10 or so. And then lately, like the past few months, been staying to like 11 o'clock midnight, somewhere around there. Um, a lot of it, of course, trying to focus on growing the wholesale model, kind of making sure that different things are in stock, out of stock. So that's really what a lot of my day looks like. Like I don't do any prepping or shipping or receiving. I haven't done any of that this year. I'm always looking at new supplier accounts, looking at current accounts, making sure like prices are where they should be, checking stock levels, placing orders, talking to my current distributors and seeing like what new products may be coming out, what specials they're having, talking to new distributors, trying to get discounts with them, getting that 30 term set up, things like that. So that's really majority of what my day kind of consists of, is just doing all those sort of things, looking at repricing, stuff like that.
Gotcha. And have you found 30-day terms pretty common?
Yeah, it can be. usually the first few suppliers are going to be really hard to get them with because everyone wants to see your previous credit references.
Of course.
So you just kind of got to keep asking. And literally, I was just super honest with them and said, hey, like, I don't have any. You're my first account, you know? And then some of that worked for me to get some accounts say, okay, we'll test you on a $500 limit and then see what happens. And then as long as you pay that off, then, you know, they'll increase that up kind of like a credit card. So it's really nice to build it that way. And then after you have a few references, and especially, you know, if you're placing like decent sized orders, they definitely will give you a net 30.
Amazing. Okay, so now I want to ask, let's see here. Oh, this is a big one. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people ask me if they can drop ship on Amazon, or maybe another version is list stuff that's local and with stock, and hoping to not use any of their own inventory. I don't necessarily plan on doing this, but it's a common question.
Yeah. So yes, you can. Technically, it's against Amazon's terms of service to do it. And also, if you include like any pricing information, any packing slips, say you drop ship something from Walmart, right? Yeah, technically, it's against Amazon's terms of service if Walmart includes any kind of packing slip or like price information, or if it comes in a Walmart branded box, which it always does. Now, I know people who do multi-million dollars a year with that exact business model, and Walmart's their main supplier. So obviously, it can work. But if you want to go the safe route, I would say don't do it. I've experienced or played around with it myself this year a little bit, and you can get caught up really quickly with it and get some bad marks on your account because if you list something for sale, say you put that you have 5 available, you're drop shipping something from Walgreens or Target's website, and then they place the orders, you go to buy that, and all of a sudden Target's out of stock, and nowhere else you can find it's out of stock. Well, now you have these 5 orders, you can't find anywhere. You have to cancel them, and Amazon really hates when you cancel orders that way. And like if you cancel like 5 orders, you can get suspended overnight for that happening. So there's some software you can use to kind of keep track of if things are in stock or if the price changes. But you know that can happen overnight while you're sleeping. You wake up to fulfill the orders and nowhere has it in stock. So I would just say be very careful, do a lot of research if you're going to mess around with drop shipping. But obviously, it can be a lucrative business.
Do you have an ideal turn for your money for when you're hoping to get it back? And also with Amazon, you probably are at the point of daily deposits, but some people don't have daily deposits. Do you look at your cash flow as far as hope that you have the money again to reinvest in a certain number of time?
Yeah, so for me, I've always attempted to have like a 30-day kind of return rate, or 30 days worth of stock on hand. So from the time I place the order, I want to, you know, be selling it within 30 days. It includes us shipping and Amazon processing and all that sort of stuff. That's what I've attempted to do. Now it really hasn't ever gotten down to that point. Right now, I'm a lot closer to 60 days just because, you know, Amazon constantly will be processing something in for 10 days that should take them 2 days. So you're kind of like always playing a catch up game with that. And a part of it is if you had the capital, sure, it's a lot easier to have 30 days. If you had, you know, $100,000 to start out with, you can afford to buy a ton of inventory, send it in, and then just make sure you never go out of stock. So that's kind of what I shoot for, is to try to sell through things within 30 days before I need to like place a new order.
Gotcha. I love it. So now you're basically spending all of your time on new income potential
Right.
when you're looking at wholesalers looking for new deals.
Mm-hmm.
Any tips for maintaining a relationship once you have one open?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I always try to talk like on the phone with my main like supplier distributors at least once a month. Kind of
Okay.
just I'll call in and say, hey, are there any like, because a lot of suppliers they have like specials or sales. They'll say like, oh, this month we're doing 30% off all of these products for us, or ask them if they have closeout items. You know, a ton of them will quit carrying a SKU and they'll say, okay, well, we're going to drop this price from $20 down to $8 just so that we can sell out of it. So I'll always like to call each one at least once a month. Sometimes I'll do it when I'm getting ready to place an order and just place the order over the phone just so I can kind of connect with them and ask them, hey, do you guys have any sales coming up, any specials? A lot of them will do like, say, free shipping during the month of July, which is super huge, especially if you know you're buying some heavier products to where you're normally paying $600, $1,000 for shipping, so you can save a lot of money there as well. So that's why I always try to talk to them each like once a month.
Okay. I think I only have a couple more questions. eBay to Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
I that was voted my second highest or best tip of last year
Mm-hmm.
was finding things to flip from eBay to Amazon. Number one was talking to realtors, because when they liquidate a house to sell, like sometimes people are getting half a house of stuff for free. So the
Yeah.
second thing is eBay to Amazon flips was identified as a huge opportunity. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I used to do a ton with eBay to Amazon when I was kind of learning like the online arbitrage space. I kind of like came across, eBay to Amazon flips, and I really loved it. My like technique was I always kind of like sniped auctions. I would see auctions like I would just sort by like auctions ending soonest, and then I would look on Amazon. Like I would make sure there's like a minute or two left. I would look on Amazon super quick and see what it's selling for on Amazon, and then I would just put in like my max price I'm willing to pay for it, and then I would get stuff like super cheap that way on eBay to Amazon. So there's tons of unlimited categories. I would just look at like new stuff. So I would do like brand new Legos, brand new toys. Used electronics is a huge one. Printers and voice recorders and a bunch of other like used electronics like that. Used calculators can be super high margins to flip to Amazon. It's just that you got to really make sure when you're messing around with the used stuff that the condition really is what it should be, and that like the eBay seller, it's like a top rated seller and has good feedback, things like that.
Any thoughts on books, reselling used books?
Yeah, so it's really great to start out and learn Amazon because the cost to do that is super low compared to wholesale where you may need $1,000 or $2,000 to really get started. But that's how I got started on Amazon, was selling books. And you can buy books for $2 and sell them for 15 and make $5 profit or so. So I love books. It's just at scale, it makes sense to do a lot of other business models because books are for the most part very slow moving. So that's why with books, it's just the more you have, the more you're going to sell, because a lot of books will take 30, 60, 90, 120 days to sell through. But it is a really great way to kind of learn when you don't have a lot of capital.
Okay. Now, how much space do you think you need to build an Amazon business? And then can I maybe ask what your prep station looks like?
Yeah. So I mean, so for instance, last year I was, yeah, on average, I was doing over 10,000 net a month, which was like all out of my house, out of like our laundry room, like one or two spare bedrooms, and like it kind of like spilled over into the living room, stuff like that in our basement. So it's possible to do it that way. Having a warehouse would have been a lot easier and probably could have, sent inventory in quicker and, sold through things quicker. But it is possible definitely to do it out of, 300, 400 square feet or so. But now the warehouse I got beginning this year is 2,000 square feet, 1,500 square feet of the warehouse and 500 like offices and things like that.
Hmm.
So it is way better to have the room, to kind of walk around, see where all your inventory's at versus like in a house, like going room to room, trying to figure out where everything's at. So it's definitely possible to do it that way. As far as like workstation wise, we have I think, yeah, 6 different like folding tables that when we get stuff, we kind of sort it out on. And then we have like shelving racks all along the walls of the warehouse that we kind of put inventory on after it's been prepped and things like that, and then ship it, send it out.
Do you have a rule like when stuff comes in needs to go out within a day or two, or do you think obviously as soon as possible, but does inventory ever pile up, or do you think it's pretty much immediately going back out?
Yeah, sometimes it'll pile up depending on what it is and how it needs to be prepped. So stuff that needs to be like polybagged or things that like need to be counted out into groups of like 20 or 50 or things like that will take a little longer to prep. But for the most part, I want to get it out within like 2 days. Is kind of what our goal is, especially things you kind of just got to slap a label on or things you only have to polybag. Definitely like try to turn it out and get it back sent to Amazon within 2 days.
Okay, so now two final questions. One question
Mhm.
is when you are just starting, I have this pop up too. Like as an example, I had somebody start with 50 grand and run out of money on eBay pretty much within 3 or 4 weeks, and listed all of it. And it
Mhm.
took forever for him to even get some of that back. So
Yeah.
like even with capital, do you recommend scaling up how much you spend each week? Do you recommend waiting for stuff to sell right at first, or how do you manage your cash flow?
Yeah, so specifically with wholesale, I always tell people when you're buying from a new supplier, even if you see a SKU is supposed to sell like 4,000 times a month, only buy 10 on the very first order, like regardless how many it's supposed to sell, because
Mm,
there's a lot of things that can happen. You can send it in. Amazon can say it's hazmat. They can lose it in the warehouse. They can say they never received it. They can say you're restricted for the brand when you were unrestricted before. So there's a lot of things that can happen. They can delete the listing. So that's why I always say only send 10 and make sure they actually sell through, because there's been tons of cases when I was starting out that I bought like 60 units of one SKU because it was supposed to sell, 500 times a month. So it's like, I'll buy 60. That way I have a bunch to send in. And I sent those in and I didn't sell through those 60 for like 4 months. So even if you read the Keepa, check the reviews, check the sales rank, it's still all kind of just an estimated guessing game. Um, same way, the other way around is that I've sent in 5 items of something that's ranked 200,000. They all sold within one day. Then I'll send in 20. They all sell within a week. So that's why I say
mm.
send 10 at most and kind of see how things start selling. And that's for wholesale. With retail arbitrage, I would just say don't go super deep on any product if you're first starting out. Same thing with online arbitrage. Don't buy 20 of one item just because it looks good on paper. Buy 5, because especially in Marshalls, things like that, a lot of those same types of products will always kind of be there at least for the next month as they kind of rotate through their inventory. So just while you're starting out, don't go super deep and try to spend all your money right away.
Sorry, I keep thinking of new questions as you're going through
No, you're
this.
fine.
So okay, receipts.
Hmm.
How are you for eBay? I all of my receipts are numbered. How do you organize your receipts for Amazon and
Yes.
invoices?
So similar to that, for receipts, we always did. My wife kind of kept track of it. For the first all of last year, everything was just thrown in a box. And then when we got the warehouse, we kind of like developed a system of we would scan a receipt in, and then kind of like a numbering system, like you said. So like it'd be Marshalls 001, Marshalls 002, and then also put like the date and the month that it was purchased in. That way, if for whatever reason on Amazon they needed a receipt for proof of purchase, I could easily go find like what date that I would look at. Because the way I build my SKUs is I build the date we sent that product in into the SKU itself. So then I can go and see like, okay, we sent it in, April 20th. So I can go find the receipt from that same date or that same month. And then same thing for invoices. We just, each supplier, we just have scan it in, then also have a file system that has each supplier like organized out.
Awesome. So now this question is a little bit of a hack because I don't know any Amazon people who are successful that don't have like an inner circle of friends, almost
Mm-hmm.
like an FBA friend group, or at least one friend that they commonly share things with. And oftentimes they'll share like maybe they'll go in on a deal together, something like that. Do you have any recommendations for maintaining an FBA circle? Because eBay's totally different. Everyone will be your eBay friend,
Right.
but FBA, any tips for maintaining or creating those relationships?
Yeah. First on just talk on that, like there's a lot of the reason is that way a lot is there's like a lot more cutthroat competition, I guess you could say, like in the Amazon world.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people like, I want to find your suppliers, I want to find your products, like I want to find your store name so I can ruin your store. So that's why like I think a lot more people like hold it closer to their chest of like what they're doing before they really want to like share their info with a lot of other people. um but I would say just obviously be a genuine person. Don't be out to like, if you're trying to network on Instagram, like I never respond to people that are like, hey, like show me how to do this, or just like I literally get messages like that all the time, like, hey, like how do I do this? How do I get started? Like go on YouTube, type the same exact thing and watch videos. Like I'm not gonna write a paragraph back to you of how exactly you can, get started on your journey. But just like I started out, like I would just message people after I had tried something and then ran into a problem. I would message them a question. So I would say, hey, I'm doing my first shipment. This keeps coming up. I don't know what to do. And a lot of people are more willing to answer those kind of questions from my experience versus like, how do I do my first shipment? Like go out and try something. And then if you run into a brick wall, then, you can ask someone and they'll be more likely to help you out with it. So that's why I would say, kind of just don't go out like asking, how do I do this? Like go out, learn on your own, and then try it.
Such a good tip. A specific question or request is
Exactly.
much easier to understand. Or
Yeah.
even for this interview, I asked like, "This is what I'm trying to do. Can you?"
Hmm.
Instead of, "Hey, I'm getting started. What do you think?" That's so
Exactly.
vague.
Yep.
And then my final question is, This is very cool to me, which is the concept of an FBA scout.
Hmm.
Right now, my former eBay photographer is now just switched over to being full time thrifter for me.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, there's always the fear that they could do it themselves,
Right.
but he understands how much space is required for eBay and does not want to do it. But with FBA, you if you you could potentially find scouts that are not ungated,
Hmm.
so they wouldn't be able to compete with you in the categories you're having them look for anyway. Have you experimented with scouts? Is that interesting to you?
Yeah, I have. I've only really used like my brothers, which obviously I can trust them and they have no interest in doing it themselves.
Hmm.
But knowing other people that do the same thing, some things they do to try to limit that is I know some people they'll have them sign a non-compete disclosure. So
Mm,
they'll say like, hey, you aren't allowed to have an Amazon store. You cannot open an Amazon store at any point that you work for us. If you do, and you can't open one, for so long after you quit working for us either. You can't compete with us on the same things we sell. And then other people, it's kind of just like a handshake agreement. You just kind of get to know the person and trust that they're not going to do that. But I know other people as well that they have people that work for them. They also sell on Amazon, which I think is kind of like, a gray area because there'll be people that are working for them buying their products. They'll see like, wow, this is really good when I'm scanning it to buy for someone else. Let me also send someone on my store. And then they're, dropping the price below you on the listing. So I would say if you're going to do it, just make sure that they don't sell on Amazon or they don't really have an interest in doing it. Or like you said, they're gated in a lot of brands and you're trying to sell brands that are you're ungated in.
awesome. So that was all of my questions. Sorry, it was like 30 questions.
Oh, you're good.
Um, so are there any other tips that may be helping other people get started, or just for me, I'm totally psyched to just do it, but I
Mhm.
understand a lot of people, they might be overthinking this.
Yeah.
So any tips for the people out there that might learn from this?
Yeah, so that's the biggest thing. Is like don't overcomplicate it, don't overthink it. In regards to wholesale, like I tell people all the time, everyone, I don't know why, but they think it's like so hard to start and do it. And honestly, it's one of the easiest things to get suppliers. Like it's just a numbers game. A lot of people don't want to sit down and do the work of apply for 20, 30 a day because they know that if I apply for 10, I may get approved for one. A lot of people don't like those numbers, but there's
Mm,
people that literally run their $20 million business off of two suppliers they order from. So you may
mm,
only need one or two suppliers. You don't need 300, 400 of them approved for. So I would say just don't overcomplicate it, whether it's RA, OA, private label, wholesale. Just kind of get started. A lot of people will sit there and watch 60 hours of YouTube videos or do things on Google. And then they get so overwhelmed. They're like, oh my God, I want to do RA, but there's OA, but there's private label. I don't know where to start. So I always say pick one business model, try to run with it for 3 months or so, decide if that's what you want to continue to do or like it or not. And then kind of you can make a jump. But don't try to start out, do a little bit of RA, a little bit of OA, a little bit of wholesale, try to get some private label research as well. So that's why I say, pick a business model, run with it, don't overcomplicate it. And if you do have questions, try to figure it out on your own first before like reaching out to people and try to, have them hold your hand and walk you through it.
that's awesome. That 90-day idea is
Hmm.
excellent. I just did that same concept with eBay, and saying, and I came up with that. It's basically 12 weeks. List 4 times a week for 12 weeks before you try something different.
Yeah.
And there's so many people who, one lady had watched 9 months of videos without listing her first
Wow.
item. And I'm just
Wow.
like, please go list your first item. Like there's
Right.
nothing these videos can show you at this point.
Yeah.
You probably know more than some of the resellers talking about it at this.
Exactly.
Just
Yeah.
start. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I'll plug your channel in the description below, and then let me know if you ever need anything, you want to do a collaboration.
Of
Um,
course.
awesome. All right, guys. Thank you so much. If you like this kind of content, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.